This room is about what can we learn from China's creator economy. And we're hosting this as part of Inside Asia. Inside Asia is a club that digs into the people, politics, issues, and industries that define the world's most dynamic continent. It's actually the first Asia themed club on Clubhouse if you want to get more content like we have for you tonight. For tonight, the next hour, maybe hour and a half or so, we'll be going over the creator economy in China and the US and comparing and contrasting them. So we'll be going over what the platforms look like on video, short video, live streaming, live audio, such as the one you're on right now, newsletters, and even other platforms. And then we'll also go over how these creator platforms monetize and how the creators differ. And we hope to do this really quickly so that you can ask questions. Let's have our main moderators for tonight introduce themselves. Peter, you want to go first?
Yeah, thanks, Ray. So I led creator growth at Twitch, and I was on the early live video team at Facebook and Twitter. Definitely very passionate about the creator economy. Mostly have been researching the creator economy here in the US, but I know everything else, China is typically a couple of years ahead.
Sophia.
Hi everyone, I'm Sophia Xiao. I knew Peter. We met at Twitch, and I was the chief of staff for a couple of years when I was Twitch. And again, very passionate about giving people how you make. That's where the world's going. And the other piece that I'm pretty passionate about is that the world is known. Asia in general is made in Asia, and there's actually a lot of original design, original thinking.
My name is Ray, and I actually just recently met Sophia and Peter, and we really wanted to do this room just because of our common passion about the creator economy. I am a small creator myself. I run a media platform called Tech Buzz China. It's a podcast in English talking about China tech. I've also expanded this into a newsletter and community forum, as well as basically a consulting service, mainly servicing investors as well as operators and trying to bring the best insights from China tech. And of course, the creator economy is a huge portion. I think everyone here probably has heard of live streaming and live streaming e-commerce. So we'll just go straight into it. And the first a couple platforms you want to talk about is in video. I think some of you might have heard that the largest IPO since Uber happened last Friday, and that was the platform Kuaishou, which is basically a competitor to TikTok in China. So TikTok doesn't operate in China, but the parent company ByteDance operates Douyin, which is the domestic Chinese version of TikTok in China, of course, and Kuaishou is their largest, most significant competitor. And just to give you a sense of how big this company is, right now it has a market cap of over $150 billion. And the first 9 months of last year, they made $6 billion. And then Peter and Sophia, you guys want to talk a little bit about Douyin?
I do know a little bit more about Kuaishou because I actually had a special project being a special advisor to Kuaishou for early part of this year. And what I'm really impressed about with Kuaishou is really obviously the speed and how fast they iterate. And I think a lot of people, I know that there was a series of conversation about China's speed. The other piece is actually very interesting, is really about how they create opportunities for creators. And I know that traditionally here, most of the social media and influencers and creators, they are mostly in advertised business, but Kuaishou as a business, their main revenue stream to start with was really about tipping and virtual gifting. They're essentially very similar. And the other piece is they're the number two. They're the number two live shopping platform in China. Obviously, number one is Taobao Live. And so commerce, live streaming commerce is especially vibrant in China. It's actually a pretty young company that they're younger than 10 years. And huge congrats to the accomplishment that they have been.
Yeah, we can talk about Douyin a little bit more later, but as I've said, it's the Chinese version of TikTok and it's quite advanced. So it's got a lot more monetization capabilities on the platform, including, like we were saying, live streaming e-commerce, which will be a big theme for this talk. Live streaming e-commerce is something they actually turned on in a big way last October. So previously they were working more with third-party platforms, but last October they instituted sort of their own system, which is quite advanced now. And so you can basically shop completely within the platform. And in this next month, they'll be piloting their own payment mechanism, which is really interesting. And Peter, you had some thoughts about how the US platforms are actually already learning from the China platforms.
Yeah, I think in the US, all the major social media companies are very impressed or maybe scared of TikTok's growth. And they're all rushing to add TikTok style short video feed, just like they rushed to add stories maybe a year ago. And I think it's interesting because they're using a similar playbook that maybe TikTok used to enter the US market, which is to throw money at the short video creators. So for example, I think Snapchat Spotlight is seeing a lot of success. They're paying out $1 million daily to creators, and they recently reached 100 million monthly active users in January. And I think just focusing on creating buzz and the star-making potential of Spotlight versus more mature platform like is what led to their success. Interesting enough, I think even though short video is taking off in the US too, I haven't really seen people really focus on the live shopping use case or commerce for that matter. It's still mostly monetizing through ads.
In China, there was this really amazing live streaming in 2020 report that came out, and there were some stats we thought we wanted to highlight.
When it comes to live streaming in China, first of all, there are over 500 million live streaming viewers in China, which is greater than the entire US population. And based on what I've seen, live streaming in China used to be about gaming and like IRL in real life entertainment. And it has really shifted towards e-commerce, especially with COVID. Many businesses in China are giving live stream a try. Total live stream sales will surpass 1 trillion yuan, which is about 150 billion US dollars this year, which is huge. Rui or Sophia, you want to talk about some of the other trends that we're seeing?
One of the things I see is also, I think, the connection and collaboration between both offline and online. And they really leverage during the COVID. And a lot of the shopping malls, as we know, that they have the most physical retail, is actually has most challenges during COVID, and similarly in China. And one of the largest, many of the shopping malls, they actually partner with the live streaming. They turn their stores into sites for creators and as a background, and help them to basically hosting shows in their store. And that's anywhere from large brands to the smaller business in the malls. And that collaboration between the offline and online is pretty fascinating and really benefits the economy.
I do want to point out some of the problems with live streaming, because I do think that a lot of the reports are really bullish, but don't point out the fact that this industry is getting regulated. That is something investors really do care about. And that's partly because there are issues like fake goods being sold. So there was recently a big scandal where one of the top live streamers sold bird's nest, but it really wasn't bird's nest, it was just sugar water. So there's increasing regulation from the Chinese government on making sure everyone who does live stream has a license, and that they're providing accurate information, consumers are protected, and that you can return your products, that there is basically a uniform policy, much like you would expect from offline retail. But that has yet to kick in full effect, but that is most definitely happening. I do also want to point out that a lot of the numbers that I myself, for example, tweet out, I will try to put the disclaimer, but I don't know if anyone reads it, is that a lot of the GMV numbers, gross merchandise volume numbers that we see from these live streamers are not indicative of net revenue at the end of the day, because they're usually just shopping cart numbers, and they don't include abandonment, or they don't include returns, etc. But still, it's impressive, given all those caveats, to say that the top live streamer last year, her name is Via on Taobao Live, actually, her GMV was reported at $4.8 billion. So again, I would take a pretty big haircut off of that, but it's still pretty impressive, given that she's one person with a large team, of course, but it is from her channel and her channel only. I do also want to say that live streaming e-commerce in general fall into two categories. A lot of times it's used for promotions for new brands. So there's a price discount factor that drives people to these things. So you also do have to take into that account when you consider GMV and volume of transactions. And then I think one thing that's really different in China is that it's become so accepted that you see really large CEOs right? So you have CEOs of really big companies. Imagine the equivalent of a Tim Cook or something, also live streaming their company's new products. So I guess we'll know that live streaming has made it in the US if the next iPhone is being sold on live stream.
Or launched there, right?
Yes, there.
A lot of attention in the US is really Kim Kardashian. When she launched her line in China, she went on Via's show for about 15 minutes. I think that it was sold 15,000 of Kim Kardashian's perfume for the first 3 minutes. So I think that's Via. That's how Via got a lot of attention in the West as well.
She is the undisputed queen of live streaming, and yeah, I guess her numbers are a little atypical. So we don't want to have everyone here think that everyone in China like gets on a live stream and sells this much. But yeah,
she's definitely a mega star there. Actually, to take the conversation a little bit in terms, we talk a lot about live streaming. And in the US, we actually has been talking about the rising of, I would say, decoupling of traditional media in the sense the newspaper and journalism. And it's really the rising of Substack. Peter, I know that you are a very passionate writer as well, especially talking about product management, as well as on the topic of passion economy. What are your thoughts there? Yes.
Yeah, I think in the US, there is a trend where the creators, they grow their audience on these large social networks like Twitter, Instagram, and so on. But there's a trend where they want to own their audience because they want to get access to like their fan email address or phone numbers so that in case they get demonetized or deplatformed, they can still reach their audience. And I think Substack has really grown rapidly based on that. One of the value diagrams is that where, we will let you access your fan email list directly and you can take it wherever you want. And the newsletter industry in the US has really heated up. Substack is leading, but there's ConvertKit, Ghost, and many other viable options. And now the big players like Twitter and Facebook are also entering the game. I think Twitter especially has a really high chance of success here if they can execute, because all the writers and all the experts are already using Twitter. So as long as they can build features to help them get email lists or help them make money, I'm pretty bullish on Twitter in this field.
And I think it's important to note here that one of the, I guess, origin stories of Substack is that they drew inspiration from WeChat official accounts. So going back to comparing US and China and learnings, WeChat is the super app that powers much of China's internet connections, and it has an official account system that allows media publishers and brands to push messages, multimedia messages directly to users. And now actually WeChat is now increasingly adding video functionality to that. I actually did just a long interview with a PM friend on this, but basically it is very tightly controlled by WeChat. And what we see actually in China is that people try to get around this by doing WeChat group chats. So it effectively, you still get that direct interaction. And then you also build a community, and you see even not just media companies, but brands and influencers like Via that we were talking about earlier. She has all these fan groups on WeChat where it's up to 500 person per group. And she has an assistant helping her organize fans and pushing out messages and promotions and making sure all her live streams are well.
Have you seen, I'm just curious here, have you seen any
attended?
Weibo and WeChat official accounts has been around for a while. Have you seen any new trends in that area from China?
Yeah, I think we have some people in the audience that can talk about this in a little bit when we open it up to the audience. But I think the main thing is that it's very heavily video now as the feature that WeChat is pushing. So going back to live streaming and content creation, WeChat's latest update basically made it so that, well, actually, I guess this has been around for the last year, so it's not even the most recent update. You can now, as long as you have a PRC ID, live stream to anyone. And now you can also have a separate identity because WeChat is a social network. So you can think of it as your Facebook identity. You can now create a separate identity that does all your live streaming. So it's basically your more public facing identity. We would think of it as your Twitter identity. So you can have both of those on the same platform within the same app using the same tool so that you can leverage your existing social network and then also build an additional incremental audience. And I think that's very interesting. Don't think anyone here in the West is quite trying that. We don't know how well it will work because it's a relatively new experiment, but that is what's happening right now.
Got it. And there's so many options in China. There's the previous version of the YY, which is the live streaming for gaming, and now comes short form video. And obviously, there is the entire ecosystem that built WeChat as a platform, as well as the latest live streaming. And what I've learned is really the ecosystem in China is quite robust. I think the US, MCN is almost a little bit a dirty word in the sense that they are, for a while, they were really popular in terms of investment, the Disney acquisition of Maker, for example, versus like in China, it's really there's ecosystem in terms, in the US, it's very much about contract management, I would say. In China, the ecosystem is really about business opportunity development, talent development. They will actually really seeking out talents, develop them, and actually help them create a business opportunity for them. With the live stream shopping become really popular, there's a whole ecosystem of supply chain as well. It's actually pretty fascinating to see. And Peter, from you as a creator yourself in the US, how do you feel about the ecosystem in the US?
I think when it comes to live streaming, it was like really hot a couple of years ago, all the big platforms. I think even to this day in the US, it's still primarily game streaming and Twitch that's leading the way. I think live streaming requires creators to really entertain their fans over a long period of time. So gaming is definitely like a natural fit, but there's other potential use cases that are still yet to be unlocked in the US. So for example, I think Clubhouse is a great example of like live talk shows where people just talk to each other. IRL streaming is really big in China, or was really big, where you have these cute guys and girls stream, and like a lot of lonely fans watch them and give them tips. Interestingly enough, OnlyFans has kind of captured some of those needs here in the US. And I think live shopping is still pretty nascent in the US, but you have both big players like Instagram and Amazon jumping in. And then you also have startups like PopShop and Shoplitlive. So hopefully the US market kind of follows China and like live shopping takes off here too.
I would say that in terms of ecosystem development, I think in the US, we are definitely having robust platforms. One of the difference actually I didn't mention earlier is US is if you look at the platform, they're very much deep dive into what makes them great. And in China, you actually when you see is between the platform, they're pretty much very competitive in terms of they want to own everything. They have this the whole idea or concept of public traffic versus private traffic. And you can see that the platform itself actually developing both public traffic as well as the private traffic to help the creators. And then there's the entire ecosystem that's very massive from anywhere from the MCN that including business develop, help to develop talents, seeking and develop talents, all the way to things like services, payments, and then all the way to even I would say that real estate, there's warehouses that has been converted. People can host the different themes that they can host their shows as well.
From my perspective, just 2 points. The first point is I'm definitely really excited to see the creator economy opening up in both the US and China. Creators is all about basically helping people make a living pursuing their passion online. And I know in China, a lot of students graduate from university and they have trouble finding a job. Just like a lot of people in China are not enough jobs. If we open up a path in China where people can just make a living online, I think that's really good for the world and for these young people. The other thing I would say is that I'm excited to see the US follow in China's footsteps and get beyond the advertising business model that all the big social networks use. I just don't think advertising is really aligned with user interests. So it's exciting to see the US, both large companies and startup, getting into subscriptions, virtual goods, gaming, stuff that helps fans pay the creator directly.
And I do think one difference, if you're coming into the room just now and didn't hear it, is that there's a lot of supporting infrastructure in China, whether it be many different platforms or the fact that there are, Sophia was saying, MCNs who go and actually discover content and are really hands-on. And which brings me to so I'm moving people up now into the speaker's box. So Raffi, you actually do run one of these MCNs. So what were you thinking when we were describing the difference between US and China MCNs?
Yeah, I was chomping at the bit. So basically, just some background on me. I work for a YouTube MCN, which is called CollabAsia. It's a spin-off of Collab, one of the kind of first generation US MCNs, multi-channel network, if you're not familiar. And so I work for a YouTube MCN, and I'm in charge of Greater China. And my wheelhouse is basically taking foreign YouTube content and putting it in China, and then also taking Chinese creators and putting them on YouTube. We have direct relationships with almost all the major platforms in China. So we work really closely with Billy Xigua or Toutiao, which is under ByteDance. We also are working now with Douyin, the video platform, actually going into UGC. So I can see from my vantage point a lot of trends in the business models that are developing. So one thing that a lot of people still don't know is that except for Weibo and Douyin and maybe a few others, almost all the platforms now have a CPM based revenue source. And so although the rates are much lower than like it would be on YouTube, there's an ability to monetize just from being popular. One of the sort of things I noticed as you guys were talking was this emphasis on the latest hot things, which are like live streaming and e-commerce, right? And then live streaming e-commerce. That is great, but that actually only appeals to a certain sector, or I would say that not that it only appeals, it doesn't work in every single case. There are creators who can't live stream because, I don't know, they're doing cartoons, for example. So there's a lot of creative content which is being generated, which doesn't adapt itself to selling stuff or live streaming, or at least not very well. So one example, for example, it's actually a former client of mine. He does bug videos. Like he'll stick, I don't know, it's really horrible stuff, but he'll stick like cockroaches in one of those plastic bins and see if you put a cockroach in with a praying mantis, what happens. Like it's like educational / creepy, but immensely popular on YouTube. He's based in Hunan, but he got himself a VPN, puts his stuff on YouTube, and millions of views on some of his videos. He can't make a dime in China. He can, but like he tried to sell insect supplies on Taobao, didn't make very much money. Even the CPM based stuff doesn't make very much money, but on YouTube he can make an order of magnitude higher rates, if not more, from the advertiser based rev share that YouTube has. And so that's one key difference, I think, because of Google's ad tech. If you make something that's interesting that people are going to watch, YouTube will put ads on it, and assuming that it follows all the rules, which is getting harder and harder, but you could just put up a video of a fireplace for 10 hours, and if people watched it, you could monetize that. You don't have to start selling stuff or try to ask people for tips. So yeah, that's my kind of mantra, is that Google ad tech supports creativity in ways that doesn't work with a lot of these China-centric business models, which are blooming now.
So Peter,
not to evangelize for YouTube, but
that's a counter argument to the advertising business model. I don't know. Sometimes I guess I play lots of dog videos or dog music. So I guess happy that someone's making money off of that. Shin, you had something to say.
So just to give some background on myself, I was formerly finance and then a marketing startup, and now I oversee a high-end cosmetics brand in China and in APAC. So I have some brand side experience on the live stream phenomenon. I will say that we've done several live streams actually with Austin, one of the top 2 live streamers, and Wea was the other one, as you guys mentioned. And I would say Austin and Wea are basically a platform onto themselves. It's basically Austin. When we look at live streamers from our brand side, we look at Austin, Wea, and then everyone else. Austin and Wea are almost always guaranteed revenue. Everyone else, the return on ad spend is anywhere from like 0.2 to maybe like 5. So if you're looking at live streaming as a like revenue platform, as a brand, it's very difficult. When we look at Austin is very expensive. He has to have the guaranteed lowest prices for that product that you're selling. So when we look at Austin, we don't really see him as a revenue driver. He's primarily a low cost and no cost marketing platform. He'll have anywhere from 6 to 8 million people viewing him every night, and then on like special holidays, like sales holidays, he'll have up to 60 million people. So we see that primarily as a brand building exercise. Austin he's basically a platform onto himself. It's getting to the point, and they're trying to do all these IP extensions to him and his entire team. We actually recently got pitched for a live stream with his dog.
I wonder how that's going.
Okay.
So Shane, you're saying that it's primarily like a way to build brand awareness and like top of funnel stuff, right? It might not be a way to make money right away.
Yeah, it's when we look at it from return on ad spend, we can spend a million RMB on a print ad that drives no sales, or we can spend a million RMB on Austin that will drive 2 to 3 million RMB in sales, and is actually going to be seen by 10 million people with the same perhaps readership as the print ad.
I understand that for the top, this is actually a pretty consistent thing that I also heard and learned is for the top creators, it's actually very much about brand awareness. And one of the trends in the US, and I actually believe that it's in China as well, is it's actually not by number of followers in turn determine that whether they're the right spokesperson or influencer or creators for your brand in that case. It's really about are they the right person for your brand in terms of conversion.
I definitely agree. When we look at sort of live streamers and KOLs in particular, we look at primarily the nature of their content and also the sort of makeup of their audience. So for instance, we're a more clinically driven, scientifically proven brand. So we'll look at the brands that the KOLs that are all about like ingredients, or we'll look at the brands that are the KOLs that perhaps have a science background who do like in the States, you have some like skin chemi and stuff like that. And these dermatologist KOLs. So those are the KOLs that we would look at in China as well. It's very focused on the target audience because they're the primary reason and the limitations because they're so expensive. KOLs in China are so expensive. You can't really do like a non-targeted KOL campaign unless you're a major brand.
Just to give people in the room some context, Austin is Chinese name is Li Jiaqi. He is the number 2 live streamer pretty consistently over the last 2 years. He's famous for selling lipsticks, so cosmetics in general. And last year, according to third-party data, he has about 37 million fans. It sounds like for some shows he's getting greater than that from what Shin said. And his GMV last year was 3.4 billion USD. Again, GMV being gross merchandise and not indicative of net revenue.
Yeah, I would say looking at an Austin or a Wea, you would be looking at probably a 20% return. So from GMV, add an additional 20% return value.
I can actually introduce Chen Yun a little bit. She is known in China as 苹果姐姐. She actually has a really interesting, not only that she's a great creator and she has a special, I would say very admirable social mission is really about sustainability.
Hi, Sophia. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm a lifestyle influencer in China with over 200,000 followers across different platforms. And I come from a background in marketing. I used to work at Uber and Uber Eats between US and China. And so wanted to add, and I have been working with brands like Apple, their iPad and Apple Watch, and Oatly, the Swedish oatmeal brand, Allbirds, and Duca. So I work with a lot of lifestyle brands that's really the rising middle class in China are looking into right now. For me, I have my WeChat official account, Weibo, and different platforms. We create videos like vlogs and also blogs for different brands that brings conversion. I want to mention that the little red book like Xiaohongshu is really the top considered by a lot of brands when doing a campaign because the conversion rate so far is one of the highest, especially for like lifestyle and cosmetics and food and beverage brands. I would say like for live streaming, it's more sales oriented for the like lowest price.
Could you describe Xiaohongshu to those people in the audience who don't quite know what it is?
Yes, Xiaohongshu, the little red book, it looks like a combination of Instagram with direct sales as well as Pinterest combined. And it's like a destination for users to look for lifestyle inspirations, for different products, for travel destinations. If say they want to go somewhere, they will go to Xiaohongshu and look for advices and suggestions and hotels to stay. If they look for cosmetics, they go and search for certain keywords. So it's like top of people's mind when they look for lifestyle and related areas. So so the difference is if you open TikTok like Douyin or Kuaishou, you look for entertainment, and then maybe you are not there to just buy things.
Yeah. A lot of celebrities are on there actually showing off their product-oriented recommendations. Famous actresses showing off their skincare routines versus on TikTok, for example, they're probably doing some entertainment content.
I think another thing that is different between US and China is like there's a lot more, Chinese people care a lot more about like how authentic the product is. And Live is a really good format for showing that. In the US, generally speaking, the products that you buy are generally authentic.
Can I ask, are there official creator marketplaces? So in China, for example, Douyin, and then actually on TikTok as well, you have official creator marketplaces. And then in Douyin, especially, you actually have even a lower tier where you don't have to be a very influential influencer. So you can just be like anyone on the platform with 1,000 fans, which is pretty small. And you go in there and you can do these potentially paid missions from brands to create videos around their existing campaigns, and they actually gamify it so you can see what other people are making and what the payout has been for other videos in case you need inspiration. You see stuff like that in the US?
I think that's really the fragmentation of the US market is really a big problem. I think the way Douyin works in China is that the official store is mostly integrated in with either Taobao or JD.com. And these two are basically the two largest e-commerce giants in China that accounts for 80% or something of the entire e-commerce market share of the country. But that's not the case in the US. So the US is super fragmented, and for something like Instagram shopping or other platforms to support e-commerce websites, they will need to integrate with a ton of different services. I think that's part of the reason why it's so much harder to do things in the US. One example is the Taobao affiliate program. It's super well done, and it's way bigger and more successful than an Amazon equivalent. And I think one of the reasons is that the variety of items you can sell on Taobao is just so much bigger than that of Amazon. Amazon is still mostly products that are sold by established brands, whereas on Taobao, obviously you still have all these large brands, but you have a lot of the smaller emerging brands that are also doing really well at selling on Taobao. And these are the people who really need the influencers, because that's how they get the distribution, they get the exposure. And so there's this really nice ecosystem going on in China, which is still lacking in the US.
Here we got a question about whether or not proliferation of live streaming was leading to some problems in society, especially with regards to children, as promoting consumerism. In terms of the conversations on the ground, I think that there's always that conversation about, are we becoming too materialistic? In the case of live streaming e-commerce, that's generally not really been applied just yet, because most of the goods you buy on live streaming e-commerce is actually on the cheaper side. It's generally not overconsumption in the sense of a conspicuous consumption, right? So you do have the luxury brands doing live streaming as an alternative way of reaching their customers, but that's not really what primarily live streaming is known for. The AOV on these platforms that we're talking about is generally $10 or less, and single ticket items is well less than that.
The latest number I've seen is about live streaming commerce is 9% of the total online sales.
Right. Yeah. So it's not dominant just yet. We just happened to talk about it because a major company IPO'd last week.
On a positive side, China has already gone through the showing off on social media phase, and there's been backlash. I think it was already 6-7 years ago. There was the daughter of the head of the Red Cross or something like that who was showing off on Weibo and got seriously trashed in the media and everything for clearly showing off too much bling. So that's already happened, and society, for the most part, I think, has rejected it in the mainstream social media case. Not completely, obviously, there's still celebrities and models and things like that, but it's not quite as bad as the West. I think is ahead in terms of mental health for creators, support for that. And The other thing I think in China that's interesting, and we could probably do whole chapters on this, is like China reveres, especially Kuaishou, the one that just went IPO, like reveres the simple life of the countryside or these like second or third tier city people who are like the guy who live streams or who's showing like his craftsmanship. So we have one creator, or we bought content at least from a guy who just like puts like paves basketball courts, and he has this big roller and he goes around and he's Leonardo da Vinci of blacktop. And so people love to see this. It's actually the Chinese word kung fu is in the martial arts stuff. Literally means to be like a master of a craft, like hard work. You put in the hard work and you get good at something. China actually is plucking these people out from rural or even urban monotony and turning them into stars on social media. So in that respect, it's still viewed as a positive. No one talks about what happens to these people after they become super famous and burn out or whatever, but that's maybe another topic for another day.
Derek, you're working on creators at YouTube, right?
Yeah, hi everyone, and
Hello, nice
thank you, Sophia and Peter, for inviting me. So quick intro, I'm a product manager at YouTube, like Sophia mentioned. I work on live streaming products as well as paid digital goods. I have two comments and also one question. The first comment was that, so like where we were before, is that creator life cycle tended to have this pattern of how they made money over time as the creator grew and matured, right? So their revenue mix and proportional income from different sources varied over time. But there was a very distinct pattern that near the beginning, these single-time payments, donations from initial community members tended to deliver the majority of the creator income until the creator was able to build up this core base, larger core base, and begin earning more of a recurring, predictable income from subscription type of revenue. And then there was this flipping point, right, when the attention scale that creators really commanded with their content turned ads into this viable source of revenue, and oftentimes became the largest source of their revenue on platforms like YouTube. And then lastly, there was this brand sponsorship, affiliate, commerce type of aspect that generally tended to be relatively small and irrelevant for a very long time until a much later stage in the creator's life cycle. And I think that as consumer behaviors change, continued growth of influencer marketing, and these new interactive social commerce tools that folks have already talked about are coming into the scene, this trend is like being debunked everywhere. And I'm super interested to hear that like a lot of the folks on this call are working to propel that even further. So that was number one. And the second comment was really around something I observed. A lot of creators, and I'm using the term very loosely here, I'm talking about artists, traditional video uploaders, right? They don't typically view live stream as a way to make money. They don't see it as a way to actually grow their audience or make a full-time living doing it. They often view this as an audience engagement tool. And so artists don't see live streams as a way to get these donations. They see it as a way to deepen fandom and to stoke loyalty in their existing fan base so that they can make more money on their primary revenues, which are generally merch, live touring, etc. And I see this trend across various different verticals outside of music as well. And
that's actually, sorry to disrupt. Actually, do you think that is this because the platform itself does not make it easier for them, or you think that they just trained to be having that behavior, or you think that's inherently just what they want to do, meaning that they just want to use that as a more marketing top of funnel?
Yeah, so I'm probably a little bit biased in my answer. I think it's a little bit of both. Because the tool sets exist, I think Dan could probably speak to this as well. It's not perfect awareness and the UX is not always the best, but I think the tools do exist for them to also monetize live streams. It is typically like they don't see it that way. And oftentimes they have an allergy almost towards being viewed as sellouts. And I think that is a very different cultural thing across China and across the US. We talked a little bit about behavioral differences and trends where China is like ahead of the US. And I'm really curious, are there trends where the two markets are just headed in a complete opposite direction? And one trend in particular, Sophia, you actually touched on this, that I would love to understand more from the Chinese market is in the West, I see this desire for a lot of creators to want to move from platforms where they got discovered, but they rented an audience on Twitch, on YouTube, etc., to places where they can really own their audience, own that communication channel, own that engagement format, own that monetization model. So is that a similar trend that's happening in China?
My understanding is in the US, what you see is the MCNs, actually even the brand itself, they actually want to have a direct relationship with the creators. We definitely know that very well at Twitch, and even actually the brand itself. And in China, actually the whole ecosystem of MCN, which is, I just think that the only difference between, the only similarities between MCN is really the name. If you look at MCN in US and MCN in China, it's vastly different in terms of how they take care of the creators and how they help the creators.
Are you talking about when creators are leaving the platform and trying to monetize on other platforms, or even creating their own platform? Because I guess what I can say is one of China's largest influencers, she's also really big on YouTube, Li Ziqi. She's
Yes.
obviously started her own e-commerce line, and I'm a regular customer. And then the largest influencer on Kuaishou, his name is Simba, has threatened to leave and create his own app.
An ecosystem of that happening already. So there's a platform called EscapeX, and they're powering a lot of these celebrity applications where they are like an enclosed ecosystem just for their super fans. You have to sometimes pay to even download the app, but oftentimes you get the app for free. But to unlock any of the true value of secret content, early previews or like early ticket buying, stuff like that, you have to pay.
I think trend in the US maybe a little bit longer term that I've been digging into recently is there's a desire to move towards more decentralized platforms powered by crypto. And the idea is no company or government can come in between you and your fans. But I can definitely see it play out in the US.
This is not crypto related, but in China, the fan economy, and I think this is true for East Asia generally, but I'm only familiar with China, is the fan economy is huge. So monetizing the most possible through your super fans is very big business. So there are all sorts of like fan management apps, but beyond that, just on all the creator platforms, Weibo, etc., you already have internal tools. For example, on Kuaishou, you can create chat groups, and then if I follow a celebrity, within the followers, I can do gamified missions and get status within that community. So it's very easy to identify who the super fans are.
I used to work in a startup that did talent management and also connected large brands with celebrities and their fans. There's also a portion of the budget, generally 10 to 20%, they reserve specifically for the moderators of the fan groups. Because a lot of the monetization, when you get a celebrity, is going to be sending it to those specific fan groups. And these fan groups generally are on Weibo or WeChat. They might have 5,000 members, and they might be like a bunch of different fan groups. But there's like generally 2 or 3 major fan groups that are like unofficially designated by the celebrity as the ones that you have to go through to contact their fans and get their fans to replicate the message that the celebrity sends out, because that's a large part of the engagement that you get, is that the fans will spread the message out for you guys, for the brand.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. Ray, Peter, we've known each other for a while actually. Peter and I go back, I think 11 years ago, back in our Microsoft days. Just a quick intro. I used to run a VC firm called CRCM Ventures. A number of years ago, we were the first investor in two people company called Musical.ly. Sat on its board for a while, and I guess 4 years after that, they were acquired by ByteDance and rebranded into something called TikTok. It was really fun, incredible ride. And since then, I've been really passionate about the creator's journey, the creator marketplace, and just short form media in general. So recently got really passionate about live shopping and live stream e-commerce. So I actually left my day-to-day VC job and started a company called Shoplitlive here in the US, particularly focused on live shopping. And I think just two quick points to add. One of I think earlier in the conversation, we talked about the marketplace difference between US and China. I think something to really quickly bring to light is the penetration of e-commerce. So in China in 2019, e-commerce was around 40% of all commerce, and US was only 11%. And last year, due to COVID, e-commerce was pretty close to 50% of all commerce. In US, I think grew more than 50%. It's still roughly around like 16 to 15%. And amongst that, live shopping and social shopping has been a primary driver for kind of the growth of overall e-commerce for the last number of years. And a lot of that is also on the fact that kind of logistics is really cheap and things can get delivered really quickly, really accurately, and very cheap costs. I think that also speaks to why return rates are so high. So I think if you're an e-commerce company in the US and your return rates are somewhere 5% around there, you'll be sticker shocked. But in China, it's not rare to see you get 30% return rates if you are during holiday season or if you do your kind of live shopping shows and a lot of people buy at the moment. And I think one other thing I wanted to point out was the influencer market just in general in the last number of years. I think McKinsey came out with a really good report in 2020. Talked about kind of this one point I thought was really resonating was the fact of influencer fatigue. Is that just over the recent years, like over 80% of companies have said that they either used or consider using influencer marketing. And we've seen over the last 3 years that there's 40% plus year-to-year growth in spending in influencer marketing. But engagements have dropped in the other direction, more than 40% year. The leading platforms dropping from 4% to less than 2%. I think on Twitter today, it's like less than 0.05% in terms of engagement. So there is this kind of growing trend of influencer fatigue, where influencers, everyone are so aware that they're being marketed to. And I think Instagram also in the most recent month have added the paid partnership type of thing. I am a firm believer that live stream shopping or live commerce has a space in this place, and that particular higher form of engagement does in fact drive higher conversion, but it's really about finding where the underserved markets are. And it may not start with some of the biggest brands. It may start with some of the smaller, more niche opportunities. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on these days.
Just to add on to what Toby said, the rates for e-commerce package couriering and logistics is so cheap these days. It's about 1 RMB, so 15 cents per package. That accounts for the return rates, and the return rates during shopping festivals can actually be up to 50%. So, and our last question is about athleisure brands in China. Is it a big thing? My comment, which is that it's been big for actually at least a few years. Lululemon, I think it's like huge in China. I have a bunch of friends who try to start various types of athleisure brands and yoga related studios. So I think that if that's a market you're interested in exploring, I always tell people when they consider China that when you look at the coastal urban, highly urbanized areas, which is what I always call developed China, which is about 200 to 400 million people, they're living much the same lifestyles as you would expect here in the West. So when intermittent fasting was hot, or I guess still continues to be hot, that's also a big thing in China. Things that you wouldn't even expect, like micro brews, that's hot in China. EDM, already the second largest music genre in China, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on forever, but yeah, athleisure is big in China.
I work with different yoga and lifestyle brands. And just give you an anecdote. I go to a Zumba studio. I go to a yoga class in Shanghai. I like all over me, 360 degree, are Lululemon logos. So then you can see the penetration of Lululemon in China. And now I'm in Dali. I go to like a very more remote area in Yunnan. And I go to yoga class. It's Lululemon. So I think Lululemon is really taking a big hit in China. It's like very aspirational. But at the same time, there are a lot of really good brands coming out of China, like Maya Active. They cater to the Asian kind of body type, and they have lab just researching new material.
Thank everyone for participating, and then please follow us. We're already saying that we want to hold like a follow-up, maybe dig deeper into some of these comments and topics that we were discussing.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for sharing your insights with us.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Your economy is a global economy. It's really good to see this dialogue between US and China.